Well, hello everyone. This is DC with the DC Capstone Report. I want to welcome everyone back on our podcast. We're starting up this year for 2024 for the Alabama Crimson Tide football team with fall camp. It's great to be back with you. Been off on hiatus for a while, and boy, what a lot of things have happened since the last time we were together on the podcast. I can't say that there's ever been a time in Alabama football history, at least that I've been covering that there's been so many changes. But as you all are aware now, Coach Saban retired since the last time that I spoke with you on a podcast. And Kalen DeBoer was hired, and with that, a whole new Alabama staff and football team, and a whole new situational players, and everything else that's going on at the University of Alabama football just became different, and a lot of things have changed, and I think sometimes some things for the good. I mean, you can't say enough good things about Coach Saban and what he has done for Alabama football. He is the greatest of all time, greatest coach of all time, and put Alabama football high on everyone's list. And we were the team to beat in every situation. So can't say enough good things about him. Wish him well in his career with ESPN and all the other things that he's done. He's still sticking around the team and has his hand in at least giving advice when asked. So it's good that he's still a little bit around the team. But that's a new situation where Kalen DeBoer, it's his team now, and he's the head football coach at the University of Alabama. So today on the podcast, we're going to take a look in our first segment with the offense. We're going to look at fall camp. This is our 1 week is under our belt in fall camp on the podcast, and this week we're going to look at the offense in the first segment. In the second segment, we're going to take a look at the defense, and then in the third and final segment, we're going to look at the players to watch, those that are up and coming, some of those veterans that have been waiting around for a while, making their debut to play, and who to watch. So we're going to look at those players. As we always do in fall camp starts up, we will look at this today from just an overall general perspective at first, kind of like what I call the helicopter view. And then as we get into next week, we'll get specifically more on the offensive side of the ball as people make moves and starting lineups become apparent. And then in the next week, we'll look at the defense side of the ball. And then finally, that last week of August, beginning with the 26th, as we prepare for our opening game against Western Kentucky. That's kind of a general overview. And again, I want to thank Lance Shores. This couldn't be possible without Lance. Lance is the one back in the studio. He's making all things possible on this podcast for Alabama football. He does a great job of doing that. I want to thank our sponsors, RollTideBama.com, FreelancePictures.com. Those are Lance's two sites that you can go and get a lot of great Alabama football content, a lot of great pictures that Lance has already got up on those sites. So be sure to go and take a look at those. And then Karen Cottingham, the sponsor of our podcast. She is a realtor right here in Tuscaloosa, but she's available to help you with your real estate needs all over the state of Alabama. But Karen Cottingham, realtor. Our phone number is 205-887-4008. Please contact Karen for all your real estate needs and let her know you heard about her on the DC Capstone Report podcast. And finally, I want to thank Martin Houston, the Martin Houston Radio Network. He's out there on all types of social media platforms. He's on X, he's on YouTube, he's on Facebook Live. Please seek out Martin Houston. Martin Houston has been so good to the DC Capstone Report, allowing me to appear on his show each and every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. And I've been able to do that for quite some time now. I just want to thank Martin. And I want you, all my listeners, if you'll go out and follow his pages. His show he's gotten more involved. He's gotten more content. If you can go out there and like his pages on social media, follow his pages, I sure would appreciate it. And then listen, if you're listening on the radio, it's Tide 100.9 every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Where I'll be on as an analyst on his show. And I just want to thank him for all he's done to help the DC Capstone Report and get our name out there. Well, again, just to remind you, without any further ado, we're going to do our first segment on offense. Our second segment, we're going to look at the defense. And our third and final segment, we'll look at the players to watch this upcoming fall camp. You're listening to the DC Capstone Report. The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on the Martin Houston Show at Tide 100.9. You can listen live at Tide100.9.com. Well, hello and welcome back to the DC Capstone Report. This is DC. It's been great to be with you. Lance Shores is back in the studio making all this happen, putting all this together, producing this whole show. And so here in our first segment today, we're going to take a look at the offense going into fall camp for this Alabama football team. Now, as we said in our opening, we know that Coach Saban is gone. It's now Kalen DeBoer's team, so I think it's important for us to know who's coaching the offense. You know, Kalen DeBoer is one of the best offensive minds in college football today. I don't think that you would get an argument out of anyone that three of the best play callers are in the SEC now, with Kalen DeBoer, Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin being top-notch offensive play callers. So Kalen DeBoer is one of the top three offensive minds, I think, in college football. So he brings a lot to this offensive side of the ball. He's hired Nick Sheridan as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. We've already heard some things from Nick Sheridan and what he brings to the table as being a former quarterback. It looks like he's doing a really good job of mentoring the quarterback room that we've got going on here. Jamarcus Shepard is assistant head coach and co-offensive coordinator. He's in charge of the wide receivers, and Coach Shep, as they've called him, has had some great things to say about this young wide receiver room, which at one point was thought to maybe be a weakness in this team, has really turned around to be a consistent improvement as far as what we've seen talked about practice. Coach Shepard himself has said they can't show improvement until you get into a game, but he's been able to talk about individuals who are making strides and learning plays and that sort of thing. Then you have Coach Robert Gillespie. Coach Gillespie has done a great job with running backs. He has a great running back room, and he's also listed as the assistant head coach. Brian Ellis coaches the tight ends. And then Chris Kaplovic, Coach Cap as they call him, is the offensive line coach. So rounding out the offensive side of the ball, I'll add Jay Nunez on there. He's a special assistant to the head coach and a senior special teams analyst. So now that analysts are allowed to do a little coaching on the field, I think that frees up other coaches to be specific heads, and we have heads of specific areas, and we have a special teams coordinator that can allow to be an analyst and play a role on the field, coaching them in the offensive side of the ball as well as special teams. Well, that's the coaches that are on offense. Let's look a little bit. What's the change this year? What are you supposed to look for on offense? Well, under Coach Saban, we'd evolved into a passing, running the ball first, setting up the pass with play action passing, and that sort of thing. What's it going to look like under Coach DeBoer? Well, I think it's going to look completely different on offense, because I think we're going to see more of a spread offense that's run by Coach DeBoer. But I do think it's going to be somewhat simplified in what they're trying to do, and complicated what it looks like on the field. And what I mean by that is, I think Coach DeBoer is kind of in that vein of Steve Sarkisian and Lane Kiffin, able to simplify the offense for the players, but make it look so much more complicated on the field when you have opportunities to run multiple plays out of multiple formations, and allowing those players to be utilized in different formations. That creates a mismatch against the defense, and so I think that's really what they're good at. So I think this team is going to, are we going to throw the ball all the time? Absolutely not. But I think the way we utilize our receivers, our running backs, and our quarterback is going to be different than it was done under Coach Saban. I think we've already heard from some of the players coming out that it's more simplified. They understand it. They know what's expected of them, and it allows them to play within their fundamentals and use their athletic ability. I think this bodes really well for Jalen Milroe. I think Jalen Milroe is going to be the beneficiary of this type of offense, because it's an offense that can be adapted to his skill set. I don't think we used him the right way last year. I never thought our offensive coordinator tailored the game toward Jalen Milroe until it was late, way late. And so I think this year he comes in as the quarterback, and he's making strides, especially in these last two practices, as we've heard Coach DeBoer and Coach Sheridan talk, that he's really come into his own the last two practices. So I think he's getting comfortable with the offense, and he's learning more of the offense, which allows him to operate in his skill set within it. So I look for him to make big strides in the offensive production. In the running back room, I don't think we're going to have a number one running back that's going to have all the yards. I think it's going to be spread around. So I definitely believe that we're going to see Jam Miller and Justice Haynes as a 1-2 punch there. And I throw Richard Young in there as well. Daniel Hill will get some carries. I just think that this running back room is too good not to give opportunities to. And with a long season ahead, I think we're going to see the running back room do a really good job of getting yards, but doing it in tandem form and have multiple runners that are gaining yards. So look for the running back room to be used well. Look like we got a good running back room to start with. That brings us to our wide receivers. I said earlier a little in the opening about them maybe being a weakness because we don't have that go-to guy. We have some players transfer out, and we've had some don't have as much experience as wide receiver. But from everyone I'm hearing from, it looks like that Coach Shepard has done a great job with what we have, and then also bringing along the 5-star wide receivers and redshirt freshmen to really make some differences. So I think everyone has pointed to Kendrick Law as being the wide receiver that's making a move. He's changed his number to number 1, and I think you can consider him the number 1 wide receiver at this time in fall camp. He's done the things that veterans do: blocking, learning his assignments, route running, speed, and physicality. I think all those things describe who Kendrick Law is. I believe he is helping with the young ones, making a difference. And I believe the offense is going to come along, and we're going to see the wide receiver room be a instead of a weakness, a strength down the road. So I think it'll go well for our offense. And that brings us to our offensive line. Our offensive line is going to be, I think, one of the most improved teams on this team. That core group is going to be one of the most improved from last year's team to this year's team. And we get Caden Proctor back, who transferred out to Iowa, then transferred back without playing any for Iowa. And I've heard that he has really made some strides, that the offensive tackle position is down to 3 people for 2 positions. And you got Caden Proctor, Elijah Pritchett, who had some experience last year as well, along with Wilkin Formby. All of those 3 have looked good. It looks like that the battle might be between Pritchett and Formby for that second one, because I believe Caden Proctor is I've heard he's slimmed down a little bit. He's gotten leaner. He's gotten more explosive, gotten stronger. So I see him making a move to get back into the starting rotation. And so those outside, it won't be bad. Coach Cap said he could play 3 guys. He'll if he needs to. He'll rotate people in. He's not above that. So I think that offensive tackle position is really in a good state. And then you got the transfer in from Michigan State, Vandermark, which can play any of the 3 inside positions. And we're really good there on the inside with Parker Brailsford, the new center, and Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts at the guards. So, and then you got Vandermark can play any of those inside positions, and you got some young guys coming along that can play on the outside as well. So I really think this offensive line is going to end up being a strength. I like Coach Cap. I like how he prepares some multiple players and can run them in and keep them fresh. So I'm looking for the offensive line to really give Jalen Milroe time to throw the ball and really open some holes for this running back room, which would be good. So I think on the tight ends, I don't look for much change there. I think C.J. Dupree and Robbie Oots is probably the 2 that's going to bring that starting that positions in the tight end. But I think you got Danny Lewis Jr. and some others that'll come along with that. Caleb Odom was a freshman that we thought was going to be playing tight end. It's really moved out to wide receiver, and Coach Shep says he's making some great strides at wide receiver. So I look at that freshman to contribute at wide receiver because of his length. He's 6'5", got some meat on him, and he's able to really, in short yardage situations, I think, go up for the ball and contend for 50-50 balls, which we hadn't been doing last year. So I think that'll be a big step as well. As far as our special teams, we got the transfer in from Graham Nicholson, the Grosso Award winner from last year. Everything I'm hearing out of the fall camp is his point production is consistency. He can hit the ball short, long, doing a great job. I think we got a great punter in James Burnip. Of course, the Nealon Hibbett, the snapper, that's consistently been his great asset to this team. And then you got a backup kicker in Connor Talty that's nothing to sneeze at. He does a good job as well. So I'm really pleased with our special teams and what we've got going. So overall, in our offensive scheme, I'm excited about what it's going to be. I'm excited about how it's going to use our players in all of these situations. I really think that we're going to have a better offense than we had last year. Well, here in the second segment, we're back here with the defense. Take our look at our defense. And on our defensive staff, you got Kalen DeBoer as the head coach, and he's an offensive mind, but I know he goes around with every position, so I think he's good at organizing, and he's hired a really good defensive staff. Kane Walmake is the defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. You got Freddie Roach, who's been here. He's associate head coach and defensive line coach. Coach DeBoer brought in Colin Hitchler as a co-defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach. You got Maurice Lindquist, he brought in as a defensive backs coach. Working with they work with safeties and cornerbacks. And then you got Charles Robinson working with the outside linebackers. So the defense is really set. And I think what's the difference? What's the difference between last year's defense and this year's defense? I think we're going to see a really big difference in the concepts of how it works. Coach Saban's defense was gap protection, gap solid, maintain your gap, maintain your lane, play in phase and out of phase on the outside with the linebackers. And I think the Kane Womack's defense is completely different. I think it's a read and react defense. You play so you can see the ball, see what's in front of you, and play the ball. And so I think it's going to be a real big difference for Alabama fans watching this year is the difference. I do think that they're going to be aggressive. I think you're going to see a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks. And I think we've got players and teams on the defensive side of the ball, units, that can actually do that. So on the defensive side of the ball, look for your defensive line to be the strength of it. I think the defensive line has multiple players that can interchange. There are going to be a lot of players that we know, like Jaheim Otis and Tim Keenan, a newcomer named L.T. Overton. All of these are going to be have some real depth at that position, but those three players have played before, and they have a lot of experience. I think that's going to help with that depth as the young players come along. So we're going to be interchangeable, be able to run a man out, and I don't think we'll lose much on the defensive line. So I look for it to be one of the strengths of this team. You go out from your you have a wolf and a bandit, which we would call our outside linebacker situation, and we got some players to fill the role of Chris Braswell and Dallas Turner from last year. I think we're going to have multiple players that will come along and put pressure on the quarterback, and I think you're going to see a lot of sacks this year, a lot of pressures on the quarterback. I think the way Coach DeBoer believes the more pressure you put on the quarterback, the less time he has to affect you on your offense. So I really believe you'll see a lot of pressure coming from that. And not only that, but in the safety position as far as blitzes and other things. So I believe the inside linebackers is probably going to be our second strength there. I think I've already heard from the Kane Womack and the linebackers coach talk about being able to have three starters at middle linebacker, three talents there in Deontay Lawson, Giadon Campbell, and Justin Jefferson. So that's great to be able to have a rotation there at middle linebacker. And I think there's some young guys that can come in and fill the void there as well. Then you move to the secondary, which I think everyone believes will be the weakest link on this defensive side of the ball. because there's so many places that Caleb Downs transfers out, so there's leaves a big hole, and then you got Terrion Arnold, and who goes to the NFL, leaves a big hole as far as cornerbacks are concerned. So you come right down to it, and you have to put together a defensive backs field that can work within this Kane Womack system and make a difference, and that's yet to be seen. But you do have Malachi Moore coming back, and he's a standard stalwart there to be able to bring this team along. You got some transfers that have come in, that in the days ahead or weeks ahead we'll see how they filter in. But we've got some really good freshmen that have turned heads and that are fighting for starting positions. You got a transfer in Damani Jackson, who's got a lot of cornerback experience from USC, and then fighting for that other position you got Xavier Mincy, and then you got one of the freshmen you got coming in and is making a difference there. He's number 12, and he's really fighting for that position. You got Xavier Brown as well, who is fighting for a position at the defensive cornerback position. And then you got a transfer in Keon Sabb at one safety, Malachi Moore at the other one. And you got Devontae Smith, who's been on the team for a while. Yeah, he's doing a great job as well. So you got 3 there filling in to be able to rotate in as well. So I do believe that in the end, you might find out that this defensive backfield is a little better than people have given them credit for. And I think you're seeing what's going on is that we don't know what how is the defense going to work without Coach Saban. But I believe in the weeks ahead, as we get into that first game and we see how they perform, a little bit, we'll see that some people have not given them credit for how good they really are. I think our defense is going to be much better than people have made it out to be. Well, welcome back to the DC Capstone Report here in the third and final segment. I know it went a little long today, but it's our first one to kind of get out there and set the field, if you will, for what we'll be doing for the next few weeks. And I want to thank again our sponsors, RollTideBama.com, FreelancePictures.com, and Karen Cottingham Realtor right here in Tuscaloosa for all your real estate needs. In this final segment, I'm going to look at some players to watch that may not be on your radar right now, but you'll see them making strides. They may not be in somebody you're familiar with, but you'll see them making strides as we go through. So I'm going to go off the top. Number 1 is the 5-star wide receiver that everybody's talking about. Is he going to contribute? Number 2, Ryan Williams, the freshman 5-star. For everything I've heard, he's been phenomenal in practices. Coach DeBoer said himself, he for a freshman who's supposed to be in high school, he reclassified. He's supposed to be going into high school right now, getting ready for a high school football. But he has come in with the dedication and the commitment that it takes to contribute and play in the SEC. And one thing is he's devoted to his craft in getting the fundamentals right. So I think what Coach DeBoer has been so excited about is knowing where to line up, knowing what your spacing is, knowing what your route is, running those routes. Once you get that, then you can play and use your athleticism that you have. No doubt he's got the athletic ability, but I look for him to, before the season ends, be a big contributor on offense. So you'll watch for Ryan Williams and maybe even on special teams as a kick returner. Wearing that number 2, he might remind us of David Palmer that wore that 2 back in the 90s. So I've heard he's got that kind of moves and that kind of speed. So let's watch for Ryan Williams. The next person I think to watch for is somebody that most people are not aware of. That's number 7, and his name is Cole Adams. He's a wide receiver. He's a redshirt freshman out of Owasso, Oklahoma. I was very intrigued by what his position coach said about him this week. He called him Mr. Reliable. Well, folks, I want to tell you this. You may not be talking. You may not hear of him like one of the 5 stars or one of the other players that are making moves. But anytime your coach calls you Mr. Reliable, that's an indication that you have the confidence of the coach. So I think that player is going to get on the field. So look for Cole Adams, set number 7, wide receiver, to contribute somewhere down the line this year on this team. The next player I look for is number 9, Jalen Mbakwe. He's a true freshman, defensive back, but I've heard rumors that he might play on both sides or might contribute on both sides and even on special teams. He's that great of a talent that he might be playing on defense some, he might be playing on offense some, and he might be on special teams in the return game some. So he's got speed, he's got athleticism, and I really think that it'd be hard to keep Jalen Mbakwe off the field. In high school, he and Ryan Williams had a lot of good battles, and I think they're iron sharpening iron in practice right now as well. So look for Jalen Mbakwe as a name you may not know now to be a name that jumps off the page at you later on during the season. On the defensive side of the ball, I think there's two players that you need to watch for. Number 23 is a defensive lineman named James Smith. You know, he's a sophomore out of Montgomery Carver, and there have been times on the podcast where I've mentioned a player. I mentioned a player one time, and he blew up later in the season and did great. That was Quinion Williams. When Barrymore I mentioned him, and he blew up and became great later on. Both of them playing in the NFL now. But now, I think the next player that comes from nowhere to make a contribution on this defensive side of the ball is James Smith. He's a 6'3", 296-pound sophomore out of Montgomery Carver. So watch for him. He's number 23 on the defensive line. So watch for him sometime during the year to make a contribution to this Alabama team. And finally, a player I think that has waited his turn and sit patiently. It's number 34, Q Robinson, Quindarius Robinson. I think that Q Robinson is the epitome of staying in this day and time where transferring is the thing to do. He has stayed. He sit behind Will Anderson. He sit behind Chris Braswell. He sit behind Dallas Turner. He's contributed on special teams. He's honed his craft. And I'm hearing that he is the most vocal. He's the one that's giving the instructions to the younger players. And I look for him to start. He's number 34. He's your outside linebacker. I look for him to start, but I not only look for him to start, I look for him to be a star on the defense and have more sacks this year than he's ever had and really make a contribution on this team. So look for Quindarius Robinson, or Q Robinson, number 34, to be an impact player for this Alabama team throughout the year. Well, that's all I have for the DC Capstone Report this week. I know it went a little bit long, but I believe it's our first one that we have a chance to get into and really discuss. So thank you for tuning in. You know, I want to thank Lance back in the studio that produces everything. I want to thank the listeners who actually tune in and listen to me talk about Alabama football. I appreciate it. If you'll comment, like our page, dccapstonereport.com. If you'll like our Facebook page. And like I said before, be sure and help out our sponsors, RollTideBama.com, FreelancePictures.com. Go ahead and follow their pages. And Karen Cottingham, realtor right here in Tuscaloosa with the Williams Group at Keller Williams. Her phone number is 205-887-4008 for all your real estate needs. And don't forget to also listen to me on the Martin Houston Show every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. on 100.9, Tide 100.9, and the Martin Houston Radio Network on all the social media platforms. Well, for Lance Shores, this is DC signing off with another DC Capstone Report.